practiced a scenario where the core module would be losing pressure, malfunctioning, so they'd have to get back to the Shenzhou-13 capsule that they came on to get back to Earth. So, and they managed to do this in a few minutes. They managed to exit in a few minutes. That's a good time.
You see, the space debris, very small debris, can threaten the life of the astronaut when they perform EVA, while a bigger space debris can threaten the spacecraft itself.
Wow. Yeah.
Now we can see that Mr. Zhang is already on board the robotic arm.
I see now, right? So he's tethered and ready to go.
He's wearing the spacesuit with the red belt.
And this equipment that he's just taken out of the core module, taken out of the space station.
I believe that the device were delivered by Miss Wang Yaping to him.
And this device, what would it be used for? This is for.
You can see, I believe that's a toolkit. You can see all kinds of tools.
Okay.
So this is also a view from the from the helmet of the spacesuit. You can see that it is moving.
Mm-hmm. And of course, you know, our focus is all tuned on the two astronauts that are actually outside of the space station, but then there's Ye Guangfu, who is actually conducting something really important to this, and that's the support that he has to give from inside the space station. So what would that involve?
You know that we have three measures to control the robotic arm. One is from the ground. We have the remote control by the ground command center to control the movement of the robotic arm. You know that the second measure is by the astronauts inside the station. You may notice that in the cabin there are three big screens. Just below screen is the control panel of the robotic arm. There are 2 or 3 handles. With these handles, they can control the movements of the handle. But moreover, you know that we have the third measure. They're onboard the devices to fix the astronauts to the robotic arm. The astronauts can stop the movement of the arm in emergency case.
Sorry, Professor Yang, just to interrupt you quickly. Let's just take a look at this footage now. So, and that is Wang Yaping, coming out. There we go. There's China's first woman on a spacewalk. Not just first woman on the space station, but also the first woman.
You can see that Yaping wears the spacesuit with the yellow belt.
So she's wearing now this new spacesuit. But you said earlier that Zhang is wearing the spacesuit from the other.
Zhang wearing the red one. The one with the red belt.
Right. Well, just to remind all our audiences, we were just looking at some footages from China's space station of the Shenzhou-13 crew, a crew of 3 up there taking their first spacewalk, and they've been up there since mid-October, and they will be staying there for 6 months in total, helping to build China's first space station, the Tiangong. And so Professor Yang and I were just looking at all that and talking about the spacesuits. So that one is the Yang Yaping there is wearing the new generation, the most recent spacesuit there that's tailored for slimmer fit.
Yeah.
That's right.
And so the pants is smaller, so she feel more comfortable wearing this spacesuit. Not dedicated for female astronauts, but for those astronauts in the future with a similar height of Yaping, comparing with Yaping, they can also wear this spacesuit. Will be also more comfortable for them because the first 2 ones is a little bit bigger for them.
And of course, we can expect more women up there in the future.
Exactly.
And 6 hours out there, I mean, that's got to be pretty exhausting, right? After 6 hours, these astronauts would, I mean, we're probably expecting them to be able to be sweating lots, but this spacesuit would be able to provide for a comfortable condition for them during this time.
Well, you know that in the helmet, there are two kind of things. On the left, there is a pipe which provides drinkable water for them. And on the right, there are also some simple food providing energy. Also, you know that before the EVA, they must wear the what we call the maximum absorbency garment, a diaper.
Right.
You know that
of course,
for so long period,
a long time out there.
They must drink water, but also they have to pee. So it is very necessary for them to have this kind of what I mentioned, the maximum absorbency garment. This is specially designed for 2 grams of this kind of material. It can absorb more than 1 kilogram of urine. So it is very effective. And this is one of the very typical transplanting of space technologies in our daily life for the diapers for babysitters. And also, that during their EVA, you've already mentioned they can feel very uncomfortable if the thermal design is incorrect. So we use what we call the water sublimator to reduce the heat. Actually speaking, with coolant. The coolant is water, so you use water to bring the heat from their body to the outer space. Generally speaking, during the EVA, because the movement is so intensive, they can produce 600 watts of heat during their activities.
Yeah, so you talked there about, the technologies up there in the suit that can be applied to our everyday lives, Professor Young. So, we're talking about 6 months up there on the space station, and they're going to be conducting a whole range of experiments, not just spacewalks, right? So there's going to be medical-related experiments, what kinds of stuff? Can you talk us through some of them?
Exactly. That's actually speaking, other experiments will be done when the two experimental modules go into outer space, the Wentian and the Mengtian modules. So these two modules has more scientific research racks on board the station. That's the Tianhe core module. The major task of this module is to operate and charge of the whole station. For instance, the attitude control, the orbital control, the management of power supply, the communication, and the thermal control. But also, as you have already asked, there are some certain scientific research racks inside the station. For instance, we have scientific research racks mainly engaged in space medicine. And also biology, and also we have
skincare. I hear is one of them as well. Right?
For instance, they will check their cardiovascular system periodically, and will taking blood samples for a certain period, maybe every week or every 2 weeks. From the astronauts are the objects of scientific research on themselves. Also, that they have exercise every day, and the loss of bones and the weakening and the attenuation of our cardiovascular system and our muscle system also must be studied. That we already have the experience of the 3 months long. It is also a long duration in space, and it has already been proved because that the Shenzhou-13 crew, our 3 astronauts, are in very good status, and their recovery is also very normal. So it proves that our measures, the nutrition, the exercise every day is effective in preventing them from losing of bones and also the weakening of muscles. But that doesn't mean that it's effective for 6 months. So this time we still have to perform this kind of study, and also there are all kinds of instruments monitoring their parameters in the orbit and also by the ground control. So this time the space medicine and also the space biology will also be a very important part for their study, because they have, as you have already mentioned, they have 6 months long, so they have more chance to perform this kind of study. Moreover, you see,
and a lot of these, some of the projects were ones that were pitched by other countries as well, right? It's not just Chinese-led projects, it's ideas pitched by other countries too.
Not now. You see that we've already selected 9 experiments from 17 countries, but usually, as mentioned by the chief designer, Mr. Zhou Jianping of the China Manned Spacecraft Program, these experiments, the equipments for these kind of experiments will be brought to the station by the Tianzhou cargo ship after construction of the station.
Okay. So
maybe after 2022.
Was there any of the? Is there any particular project amongst these that you would really like to see being conducted?
Yes, some are conducted on what we have already discussed, space medicine and biology. Some will be also engaged in the fluid dynamics in microgravity environment.
Is that what you find most interesting?
We've already have this kind of environment on board this station now, because I have already mentioned that there are 2 to 3 scientific research racks on board this Tianhe 1. Right. One is for space medicine, and one is for the fluid dynamics in the microgravity environment. And another is one is very interesting, has an automatic hanging device which can have no contact with other objects, and it can provide a more perfect microgravity environment for study the phenomena in physics. So this is also
just suspends by itself.
It has the control by the airflow so it can have more slight change of its movements on board station. Although you know that our astronaut in space is in a microgravity environment, but not zero, not strictly zero. So in many cases, if we want to have a more precise scientific research on some certain physical phenomena, we need this kind of improvement. So it is very interesting. Moreover, in the future, we will also have space astronomy and other studies, for instance, maybe observing the Earth and other items. So I should also emphasize that the EVA performed today is also very important for future scientific research, not only for the maintenance, repair, and assembling of the station. In the future, many of the instruments for scientific research will be mounted outside the station. So you know that today the two devices were mounted outside the station, and in the future some devices will be dedicated completely for research works, not for the maintenance.
So one other thing that would be interesting about this mission is that during their 6-month stay, so Wang Yaping, she's going to be giving a lecture on physics, isn't she, to students here on Earth. So what do you think that will entail?
That's fantastic. You know that Yaping is always or recognized as a teacher Wang. So you can still remember that during her first space lecture in 2013, during the Shenzhou-13 and the Tiangong-1 mission, more than 60 million pupils and middle school students watched her lecture.
Wow.
How can you imagine that? So teacher Yaping is very famous. I think that this is also very important. Actually, yes. And also, you know that it is very interesting and very meaningful for us. You know that it also encourages the young people to choose science and engineering as their lifespan career. So this is very important for us. And today, many outstanding young people in space field are the students of Yaping.
And of course, I mean, what better incentive can there be to really delve into these subjects by seeing somebody who's actually built on this and achieved, with something like this, being up in space, completing something really quite astounding for Chinese space development. Well, Professor Yang, it's great speaking to you. Thank you so much for joining us here in the studio to talk through another spacewalk, and we've got more to come in the next 6 months, don't we? Another 2 spacewalks.
We are witness of the history.
That's right. That's right. Thank you so much. Well, in October, the 3 taikonauts embarked on China's longest ever crewed mission for space station construction. So let's take a look back at some key moments of the Shenzhou-13 mission so far.
On October 16th, the Shenzhou-13 spacecraft was launched with 3 taikonauts aboard. It's the 21st flight mission since China's manned space program was approved and initiated, and the 2nd crewed mission for China's space station project. After entering orbit, Shenzhou-13 conducted a fast automated rendezvous and docking at 6:56 a.m. with the station, consisting of the Tianhe core module and the Tianzhou-2 and Tianzhou-3 cargo ships. The process from launch to docking took about 6.5 hours. By 9:58 a.m., the 3 taikonauts entered the core module, beginning their 6-month stay in orbit. On October 17th, the taikonauts entered the Tianzhou-3 cargo ship that had docked with the station 1 month earlier. During their 23 days in space so far, the taikonauts have performed daily tasks, including transferring supplies from the cargo craft, managing the space station combination, testing new spacesuits for extravehicular activities, completing in-orbit medical checks, conducting weightlessness protection exercises, and carrying out space experiments. In addition to their work, the taikonauts have been eating well and exercising. They've been provided with more than 100 kinds of food, with some recipes tailored to their personal tastes. And they've also maintained their physical health and appearance, even giving each other haircuts.
Well, let's also look back on the historic moment of the first spacewalk by a Chinese woman. And you can also visit our website, CGTN.com, and the CGTN app for that.
It's been 3 weeks since China's Shenzhou-13 taikonauts were launched into space.
November the 7th is the time when they carry out their first extravehicular activities. This time, compared with Shenzhou-12 mission, it's more special because it involves a female astronaut, and it's also China's longest crewed mission for the construction of its space station.
A space station is made up of several modules. The first and core module of China's space station was launched in April. Officials say the future module features a smaller robotic arm to assist the larger one already in place.
而本次乘组呢，将会在舱外安装双臂组合转接件和悬挂装置。
During their spacewalk, the taikonauts need to install two devices that'll help the large and small robotic arms coordinate a wider range of actions for more capabilities in the future.
Walking in space is not as light as most imagine. Astronauts have to bear the weight of more than 120 kilograms of spacesuit. But experts say it's their most necessary life support system in the vacuum.
出舱作业活动呢，是一项技术难度比较高、技术风险也相对比较大的。
Extravehicular activities have always been considered technically difficult and risky tasks. There is a pressure difference between the EVA spacesuit and the vacuum. This difference limits the flexibility of the suit and the ability of people to operate in space.
Astronauts controlling body movements and robotic arms, communicating between Earth and space, coordinating among themselves inside and outside the space module. Experts say all these factors affect the success of a spacewalk. 刘嘉欣 CGTN 北京。
Well, as we said, this is just a first of three spacewalks altogether for this Shenzhou-13 crew that's up there at the space station. They'll be there for 6 months. So we've kept Professor Yang Yuguang on with us here in the studio, Professor Yang. So we do want to pick your brains just a little bit more. So just tell us a bit more about what to expect for the next 2 spacewalks that's coming up for these 2 astronauts.
Well,
Astronauts,
as already discussed, today we will practice everything necessary for the future construction and maintenance of our station. So they must do all kinds of movements, including the assistance of the robotic arm, assist the astronaut move fast from one point to the other. And also we have to practice the movement of the astronaut from one point to other along the surface of the station. And you may notice from their voices today that Mr. Ye Guangfu will practice the second EVA in the coming months. So that this is also very necessary. That both Ya Ping and Mr. Ye Guangfu and also Mr. Tang Hongbo belongs to the second batch of China's astronauts. So they are, generally speaking, they are about 40 years old now. So
they're the same age.
Yeah. So they will place, I think, in the future, they will place a major role in China's during the operation phase of China's space station. So they are in golden age, young enough, strong enough, but also well experienced. So I believe in the future, Ya Ping, Guangfu, and also Hongbo also have the chance to revisit our station during their future missions. And as you have already asked, during the second or the third EVA, we will also continue to test the performance of our EVA spacesuit and also to performing and accumulating our knowledge and experience in this field. That's the longest duration of the record is held by the United astronauts by Miss Susan Helms, also a female astronaut, and another gentleman called James Wolfe. They performed the EVA about 9 hours. So we still have a little bit to go to catch up with them.
All right. Well, Professor Yang, listen, thank you so much. And this time we are going to let you go for real. But thank you so much for giving us all your insights and talking us through this. Professor Yang Yuguang. So we are wrapping up our show now. Before we go, let's look back this time on the historic moment of the first spacewalk by a Chinese woman. And of course, you can visit our website, CGTN.com, and the CGTN app to see more on China's spacewalk. I'm Jiayang in Beijing. Thanks for watching.
说要多俩。
按正常计划，打开出舱舱门，开始出舱活动。
从返回舱进入轨道，航天员聂海胜、刘伯明、汤洪波先后进入天河核心舱。
请全国人民放心。哇，这外面太漂亮！
目前在研型号当中，系统最复杂的，应该说技术难度最大的一个航天器。
想哭的时候一定要把头仰起来，不让泪水流出来。
飞得离太阳最近的人，
只要有50%的把握，我就敢上。
各号注意，我是北京，下面通报返回舱第4次落点预报。
On September 17, 2021, 3 astronauts landed in the Gobi Desert in North China's Inner Mongolia. They had spent 3 months in the core module of China's space station.
将会有更多的航天员来刷新记录。
As the 3 entered the atmosphere, Commander Li Haishen might recall an incident that happened 18 years ago. The life and death experience of China's first human spaceflight.
我们大厅外边烧得通红啊，然后开始出裂纹。哎，太可怕了啊！太可怕了。 没人跟你说过，你也不知道啊，你不知道。他这个时候，哎呦，你觉得这舷窗要裂了，你想是啥概念？当时真是汗毛直竖，啊，然后这个裂的就像那防爆玻璃一样，要快要快。
回车3号报告。回车3号，请讲。返回舱落点现场地势平坦，返回舱呈水平状态。 缓冲着陆发动机已工作，除伞已脱落，动作完毕。
我束缚到这个座椅上，你也不能动，不能动。然后这边先出现了，然后这边慢慢也出现。等这边一出现，我反而在心里头放下点心，啊，一个是这边它裂那样也没怎么地，这边也裂了，好，一般的这种故障，两边都出的可能性也不是特别大。
拐43正在落点现场降落，地面分队目视返回舱降落伞。 北京回车3号报告，称除伞已脱落。
那么实际上，我是觉得，我对航天这个，特别是首次的这种飞行。 这种意义，那么应该说它可以忽略掉所有的一切，
包括可能回不来。
对，说得更直白一点，你觉得值不值得？如果你觉得值得，没有问题，你就会很好的去面对的。我们航天员之间在开玩笑说，只要有50%的把握，我就敢上。
和平利用太空，造福全人类。Make use the outer space peacefully and benefit of humankind.
Sounded like in Baghdad.
There are no survivors.
Against the Al-Qaeda terrorist training center.
People, lorries and cars. Grenades and shaping the situation. That's one small step for man, one giant leap for mankind.
In 1969, Neil Armstrong delivered his famous words from the moon. By this time, China had already been working on its first manned spacecraft research for 2 years. Chen Shui-sun, the father of China's rocketry program, dared to dream big.
At 9:30 that night, the fifth country in the world, following the Soviet Union,
播试验局报告，收到了东方红1号播送的《东方红乐曲》，声音清晰洪亮。
Before China's first spacecraft was born, it had a significant name, Shuhuang, First Light of Dawn. The Chinese plan was to put 2 astronauts in space within 2 years. In 1971, the first 19 candidates were chosen. Like the Soviets and Americans, they were all fighter pilots.
这段影像记录了上世纪70年代中国航天员的早期训练过程。改装后的小型飞机成为失重实验室，在高速下坠中实现40多秒的失重状态。摄影机拍下了坐在后排的锻炼员在失重环境下练习吃东西、喝水的过程。
Due to a social turbulent era, China could not afford to undertake such a massive project. China's first manned space project was halted after 8 years. The United States had already completed 6 crewed missions to the moon, and by this time in 1975, launched 2 Mars landers, Viking 1 and 2. But there was a silver lining. Chairman Mao Zedong and US President Gerald Ford held a historic meeting in Beijing. 6 days before their meeting, China launched its first recoverable satellite, Jianbing-1, laying the foundation for its future success in space. The turning point was in September 21st, 1992, after a 17-year break. China decided to restart its manned space program and set a clear and ambitious path. Named after the date, Project 921 was born. It had a 3-step blueprint. First, put an astronaut in space and ensure his or her safe return. Second, carry out EVA and launch a space lab. Third, build a crewed space station. China began building its new crewed spacecraft. It was based on Jianbing's satellite technology, but with a new name, Shenzhou. 4 Shenzhou craft cleared all technical obstacles soon after. But now, the big question: who's going to be China's first man in space? In 1998, 14 candidates were selected from among China's best pilots. They were thrown into the harshest training environment, also with help from Russia. Only 1 was chosen. China aimed to launch its first manned mission in 2003, but it turned out to be one of the most disastrous years in the history of spaceflight.
The Columbia is lost. There are no survivors.
There were 2 tragedies in the United States and Brazil. 28 people in total died. The pressure was on China, but it kept the launch date unchanged. At 9 a.m. October 15, as the steel tower released the launch vehicle, the nation held its breath. History was made. Young Li Wei became a legend, the first Chinese person in space. China joined ranks of the Soviet Union and the United States. 2 years later, Shenzhou-6 carried another 2 astronauts into space. China had accomplished the first step of the 921 project. The next step was EVA and a space lab. A month after the end of the Beijing Olympics, 2 astronauts did the first spacewalk in 2008. But things didn't go their way.
上去过去。好了。
这个时候的出舱活动新疆展开。轨道舱火灾，
轨道舱火灾，轨道舱火灾，轨道舱火灾，连续3遍，非常急促。
突然间听见火灾这2个字儿，脑瓜子、脑皮子发麻呀，就感觉脑皮子唰一下子就是凉了一下，感觉到头发每一根都立起来了，瞬间的第一反应就是这个反应。
而且我眼睛看到的仪表上，就像消防车那个灯一样，红的在闪。
这个最难处置的2个特殊情况呢，一个就是火灾，一个就是舱体失去密封。
我当时甚至想，如果关上舱门，如果发现有一点火苗趋势，我会当即决断，让返回舱值守的舰把我们的舱门分离，让我和志刚分离出去，让他平安的返回。当时内心的斗争真是异常的复杂。
Thankfully, it was a false alarm. The vacuum had affected the instrument board. In 2011, the US Congress passed the Wolf Amendment. NASA was banned from space collaboration with China or any China-owned company. But this did not stop China's quest for space exploration. Not long after, China sent its first target spacecraft into orbit and carried out automatic and manual docking. And finally, female astronauts joined the team. Tiangong-1 was an entry-level space lab. Its main tasks were docking and orbital experiments. Tiangong-2 was a more advanced version. It tested technologies needed for the construction of space station. Astronauts started to spend more time in space. In 2016, the Shenzhou-13 circled the Earth for over a month with astronauts on board.
我这爽不爽？爽！
11号飞行任务安全返回，申请归建，请指示航天员金海鹏、航天员陈东敬礼。
A woman was busy clicking away pictures. She just looked like one of the fans in the crowd. But this was no ordinary woman. She was Wang Weifan, the astronauts' chief trainer. She was responsible for setting up the whole selection and training from scratch.
哎，王总，
王总，哎呀，
海鹏，你太棒了！
谢谢，
太棒了，
都是你培养的，
真是太棒了。然后那个开舱也是你开的，是不是？然后那个，哎呀，我当时我参加那个新闻发布会去了。
哦，是吧？
对。
看来锻炼黑白。
对。
下之前到现在。
锻炼了。
好的。
好的呢，就什么？
最后我说
跟自行车蹬的呗，拉力气拉的呗。
对啊，我说兄弟，我说你老实的待着。
这个工作是一开始是一个空白，没有人做过。刚才我说了，没有人做过，没有经验，也没有人知道怎么做，也没有人告诉你怎么做。我们总师就对我说：“那个小黄，你把这个方案给写了吧。”
再快点，3轮卡，再快点。
At that time, Huang Weifan was only 28 years old. She had no guidance and training experience. She had limited information from home and abroad. But 3 months later, she came up with a general training plan for astronauts.
我觉得这个就是智慧。我设计了个大表，每个系统都给每个系统发，给7个系统都发了，给火箭也发了，飞船也发了，每个系统发，然后让他们给我反馈，说你从你这个系统，你觉得你对航天员你有什么要求？ 你比如说，你对航天员，你需要什么？航天员操作你的什么设备？你出现了什么故障的时候，你需要航天员进行处置，先让他们提需求。
It's not easy to become an astronaut. There are many tests to pass, and this includes a 15-minute face-to-face interview. Scientists and engineers from different teams grill them with questions, and psychologists watch every facial expression and action.
情况下，它如果是能自动接替了它那个完成这个点火任务，我觉得应该是可以这个当天化。
两种故障是不是一个概念？
由于前一种故障而引发的第二种故障，它有一定的因果关系。
把那个其实是你一开始开的是副风机，后来就成功把它切换到主风机了。你在过程中后边应该关主风机。
6号飞船，这两种情况存在吗？
现在快点。
这时候在面板上反映的不是一个状态。
拿不准，我把俩都给它关了。
这个已经告诉你时间了。
造爬。先爬。确信，不是先爬的。对。
我始终是觉得自己是幸运的，就是很多东西你是与生俱来的。比如说，我可能能从复杂的一团乱麻中，我很快的能给它理清，我能抓住关键，我一下能看到问题的实质。
Huang Weifeng worked behind the scenes. She was instrumental in developing the space program, like tens of thousands of engineers and scientists.
时候一开始就想，一定是一个文明英雄。我们在生我之前，没有人知道。我那时候跟我爸我妈我都不说，那个时候工资也低，就是要名没名，要利没利，你什么都没有，你不让，你也不能说到这儿去到那儿去，又工作又那么辛苦，那你靠什么坚持？那就得靠这种信念，就是你得热爱这个事业。别人不知道没有关系，自己知道。你听没听过一首歌，就是叫《祖国不会忘记你》？我每次听这个《祖国不会忘记》这首歌的时候，我每次听，我都会流眼泪。我记得是什么山河知道，什么知道我是吧？就是说他不会忘记嘛，就是那一句的时候，我觉得特别的有感触，特别有感触。
在征服宇宙的大军里，那默默奉献的就是我，在辉煌事业的长河里，那永远奔腾的就是我。不需要你歌颂我，不渴望你报答我，山知道我，江河知道我，祖国不会忘记，不会忘记我，祖国不会忘记，不会忘记我。
In 2017, China's manned space program completed its second step. The first cargo spacecraft, Shenzhou-13, docked with Tiangong-2 3 times. It tested a series of new technologies, including transportation of living supplies and in-orbit refueling. Then began the third step, building the space station. It's called Tiangong or Heavenly Palace. It consists of a core module and 2 experimental modules and can dock with manned spacecraft and cargo ships.
供电站呢，是我们目前在研型号当中系统最复杂，应该说技术难度最大的一个航天器。
The International Space Station has 16 modules. but the China space station only has 3. The Tianhe core module is bigger than any single module on the ISS. It's 16.6 meters long, the equivalent of the height of a 6-floor building. The 3 astronauts have a living and working space of about 50 cubic meters. When it's completed, the China space station will weigh less than 70 tons, much lighter than the 400-ton International Space Station.
我们不比规模，比效益。也就是说，我们发展空间站的目的是支持大规模的开展空间的科学实验和技术实验。比如说，在重量占比上来讲呢，我们科学实验所用到的设备的重量，比起总重量来讲的占比，那我们相对来讲是比较优的。那么我们在供电，我们整个的发电功率当中，我们所用于科学实验的这个供电的支持，也相对是比较高的。
The core module was finally ready for launch. It blasted off in April 2021. 2 months later, 3 astronauts on board Shenzhou-13 entered space. They opened the hatch and began their 3 months in a new home.
正常你就位了吗？我在正边，给你让开出舱位置。
And when they walk outside, they would be in the new generation spacesuit. It doubled the amount of time that could be spent outside the capsule to 8 hours and can be reused as many as 15 times in 3 years.
神舟12号报告，已站上机械臂。
One of the most eye-catching technology wonders mounted on the station is this, a giant robotic arm. The engineers like to call it a transformer. The 10-meter robotic arm can bear 25 tons of torque, the equivalent of 5 elephants. It can even walk on its own, monitor the outside environment, install modules, and shuttle astronauts to any working spot outside the core module. China's space station will be completed in 2022. After 3 decades, over 10,000 days, and hundreds of launches, China can proudly say it has a home in space. Ni Haisheng will soon be 58 years old in 2022. He's already dreaming of his 4th mission. Like many other Chinese astronauts, Ni grew up poor in a small village.
过得挺苦的，特别是一到了春季以后，有时候可能吃的都接不上了。冬天冷的时候，有太好的防冻的、防寒的衣服是太多，那个手和脚跟会冻烂了。
As he herded cattle by the river, Ni's favorite pastime was to gaze up at the sky. He had a recurring dream.
就是长上了翅膀就飞起来了，就跟鸟儿的飞。其实这种梦不是小时候做，后来就伴好多年，感受在梦中就飞起来了，这胳膊一伸啊就飞起来了，很舒服。
Flying is a dream for many. Back in 1390, during the Ming Dynasty, one man decided he's going to be the world's first man in space. One who was an alchemist and the emperor's firearms expert. He built the world's first launch vehicle, tying 47 gunpowder-filled rockets to a chair. He thought this device will carry him into the sky. Unfortunately, he died in the attempt. 6 centuries later, China launched its first carrier rocket, Long March 1. It was the first of the renowned Long March family. There are now 24 types of the Long March rocket. The super heavy Long March 9 is still in development. Long March 9 may not be as powerful as NASA's retired Saturn V, but it's going to be China's only super heavy lift rocket. The pace of Long March launches has accelerated over the last half a century. It took 37 years to complete the first 100 launches. The second 100 took 7.5 years, but the next 100 launches took only 4 years and 3 months. There are 4 launch sites: Jiuquan Launch Center in the northwestern desert, which is China's first launch site. Xichang Center in the southwestern mountains, which saw the most liftoffs. Taiyuan Center in northern China, and Wenchang on the coast of Hainan Island in the south. Jiuquan Center has played a central role in China's manned space project. 12 Chinese astronauts have now been to space. All of them took off from Jiuquan. Low latitude and proximity to the sea make Wenchang the best site for launching new generation heavy lift rockets with environmental friendly fuel. Long March 5 and Long March 7 both made their debut there. Wenchang also launched China's first Mars mission, Tianwen-1, and Chang'e 5 that brought moon samples back to the Earth. But the road has been bumpy. On March 22, 1992, China attempted to launch an Australian satellite using a Long March 2E rocket. But it failed to lift off due to an engine ignition error. This failure was the first of many in the 1990s.
一段时间，一直到96年10月，我们失败特别频繁。实际上，我们航天到了80年代末、90年代初，我们本来已经有很好的形势了。从我们这个发射成功率来说，我们在此前一直保持90%以上的发射成功率，但是进入90年代以后，我们这个成功率迅速下降。
我们底下人称为黑水，就是我们的航天已经进入了低谷，我们去发射测试，咱们医院还能不能经历这个考验？
最影响深的就是215和818。从那个时候开始，拿我自己本人来讲，我才深深感到这个要进入了国际这个商业发射服务市场，比我们原来想象的要复杂得多。它除了本身要求是这个要有一定的可靠性，否则的话，保险都买不下来。再一个呢，就是我们这套管理，它是一整套的这个东西。
你知道，到了80年代末、90年代初的时候，过去你像我大学毕业，46，然后转过1年56，然后62、78，就是这样，没有别的，
就这么多钱，
就这么多钱。另外开始有科技进步奖，要评高工，要分房，有中国电话，一系列的待遇问题都出现。
要到靶场发射任务了，上了火车，他不是想他这个质量技术，他想的是我这个礼品怎么赚钱啊，分奖金啊。
可能是在政策上的不到位，或者心理的不平衡受的这经济这个需求的牵引，他考虑到其他的问题，没有聚精会神把自己工作做好，这实际变成了一个产生质量问题的土壤。
But after a series of institutional reforms, the Chinese aerospace industry was back on track. Since 2018, China has launched more rockets into space than any other country. Project 921's goal is to build a space station. 3 rockets are needed for this mission, one to ferry astronauts, the other for heavy units, and the third for supplies. Or more explicitly, the rockets would carry the Shenzhou craft, the core module, and space labs and the cargo ship. Those launch vehicles have to be extremely safe, reliable, and economical. These tasks are carried out by the Long March 2F, the Long March 5B, and the Long March 7. The Long March 2F is China's only human-rated launch vehicle to put people in space. From its maiden flight in 1999, it has held a perfect safety record. The Long March 7, a medium-lift launch vehicle, delivers supplies and will carry a future generation of spacecraft. garnering the nickname of Fat 5 from Chinese space enthusiasts. The Long March 5 is a giant rocket and the most powerful in the Long March family. With a thrust power of over 1,000 tons, it's an impressive feat of space engineering. It can put a 25 tons payload into low Earth orbit. The space station, China's lunar probe and its Mars mission depend on the Long March 5, one of the world's most powerful rockets. It took 14 years for Long March 5B to make its maiden flight, but it put China among the world's most powerful launch vehicle makers. What do ordinary people think about rockets, astronauts, and space labs? We asked some of the students at the elite Tsinghua University.
我说起来，就是小的时候就家在农村住着，然后没有城市这样的高楼和灯光，在晚上的时候，所以在晚上在院子里面唯一的光源就是天上的月亮和星星，所以这个时候星星就会显得特别亮，所以就会很喜欢在晚上的时候抬头仰望星空。
03年的时候，其实在神舟5号第一次载人升天的时候，其实那个时候我还很小，我在电视前，在它倒计时5、4、3、2、1发射的这个过程，4、3、2、1，这个画面是永远停留在我脑海里的。可能其他画面现在记忆已经模糊了，但是这个时刻对于我的震撼是一直保留至今的。
China became the 5th country in the world.
小时候听爸爸妈妈们说，就是天上有一颗星星是中国人的，它就是东方红1号，在那里听过一段音乐，对吧？东方红1号当时发射上去，其实你想啊，那个是我们第一次把这么大体积的一个航空器运到上面去，我们能想到的是什么呢？我们放一段音乐，也没有去说在那里读个新闻联播，而是选择了放一段音乐，然后那一个感觉就是很触动我。我觉得中国人很有情怀，很有那种自己情感上的一种张力在里面。
Before infants see the world, they hear from inside their mother's womb. What are the sounds of the universe for mankind? In 2020, a dozen students specializing in aerospace, art, architecture, and music formed a team. Their aim: translate the universe into sound and music that we can hear. And this is their final product, a sonic art device. It consists of two parts. A small ball in a glass box randomly floats on a satellite, and a sensor captures its data. The satellite also collects real-time data of cosmic rays and transmits them to the Earth. A big ball on Earth simultaneously mirrors the one in space. The sound device then converts the cosmic rays into music using a special algorithm.
我们这个项目可能就是说，它是一个对于太空交互装置，也是中国目前为止第一个尝试着，在太空当中做太空与地面进行艺术交互，包括进行科普的这样一个项目。
The students say they got their inspiration from their childhood.
中国航天。从小种下的一个萌芽，它逐渐长大成一片森林的感觉。我还记得非常深刻的是，当时在初中的时候，是王亚平。
初中的时候，应该是2013年，航天员王亚平进行了一次太空授课，然后当时我是在读初2，我现在还清楚地记得授课内容。当时航天员说，我们在太空上的时候，其实还是受到了。地球的重力加速度大概有7.8左右，然后既然航天员说有重力，那为什么没有掉下来呢？后来学了一些物理之后，也就 理解了为什么是这样的，然后于是对这个航天方面也会感兴趣，于是最后就选择了这个专业。
飞天梦永不失重，科学梦张力无限。同学们，再见！再见！
For these students, rockets and space are special.
是杨利伟，对那一刻的时候，就是全班啊，小时候大家组织一起看，然后那个时候给我的感觉最大的感受就是探索未知。
我觉得人类本身的进步就是一种最大的浪漫，然后我觉得人类未来必然面对的困境就是地球上的资源枯竭，然后，这种困境使我们必然将 脚步迈向更深的星辰大海。
我觉得中国航天一直在做的一件事情，就是这种探索未知的精神，它是给我们一种精神力量。这个东西到底能不能成，能做成什么样？到底火星能不能适合人居住？这些东西就是它不是有一个明确答案的，它是需要来回考量的。那这样一个状态，我们一直在探索，然后一直鼓舞着我们，这种状态是我比较向往的。
China's aerospace generation is gradually growing. From creative art to Lego-like toys, China's manned space program is trying to get as much public support as possible. A decisive moment soon came.
这次飞行任务啊，是我国空间站建造阶段的第一次载人飞行。我有幸能够开跑空间站建设的第一棒。
我们乘组已进入我们的太空家园天河1号核心舱，
做四舱过闸段的一个准备。
哇，这外面太漂亮，好亮啊！下面有白云朵朵，像海洋一样的，跟随我的步伐，一起自由的飞翔吧。
Liu Boming takes a morning walk. This 55-year-old has been a part of all of China's spacewalk tasks. The first in 2008 only lasted for about 20 minutes. The second and third was about 13 hours combined. Before finishing his final spacewalk of this mission, Liu stayed on a bit longer outside the capsule.
哎呀，飞在蓝色的星球上空，等他好好看看。
哎呀，我也想出来看了。
Then he composed a poem.
宇宙浩瀚路迢迢，1万儿女架天桥。漫步太空，人不老。中国航天接力跑。
The three astronauts joined Chinese children in celebrating their first day back at school.
航天员叔叔，你们去太空都带了一些什么有意思的东西？
我坐火箭来到了太空，都长出牙来了，人不老。
They became tour guides and vloggers, sharing their experiences with the younger generation. The space station will be operational in 2022 with 8 more launches in the logbook. 2 will deliver the lab modules. 3 will serve as cargo vessel flights, and 3 more will be manned missions. China's space station isn't alone. The International Space Station has been orbiting for 23 years. It's a joint program involving 16 countries.
The International Space Station is a joint construction site that everyone, for example, if it's a 4-bedroom house, that everyone build 1 bedroom. But Chinese station is a Chinese-owned station at this moment.
The ISS is nearing the end of its life. It was designed to last until 2024 and should be out of service by 2028. China will become the only player in town for a while until the United States returns with the ambitious Artemis program. An essential part of this plan is called the Gateway. NASA says it will be an orbiting outpost to support activities on the surface and a staging post for deep space exploration.
Turning American astronauts to the moon.
We can see that there is a certain policy of constraint and confinement from US, but we're capable of putting everything together by a single nation without the interference of international policies. But in fact, we do have many collaboration with international partners, including NASA in the areas of lunar explorations and Mars communications and many other sectors.
Applications have poured in for over 1,000 experiments on the China space station. European and Chinese astronauts are training together for future missions. The Tiangong will not be the end of China's space exploration. Astronauts may soon be on board a new generation of spacecraft which will replace the current Shenzhou series. The first test flight was in May 2020. The new two-module spacecraft is reusable and can ferry up to 7 passengers to and from space. But will Chinese astronauts land on the moon?
The station is designed for decades to come, so I don't want to exclude the possibilities. Once you have the competence and capability of launch vehicles, we also want to see all possibilities of international collaborations, in particular in lunar and Mars exploration. I think to get it done by a single country is very ambitious, and to have international collaboration, we can go much further.
Make time for civilization, for civilization won't make time. Renowned words from Yu Cixin, the author of science fiction Three-Body Program. The quest for the unknown has driven human civilization to evolve from the emergence of first humans to the modern information age. A journey that's taken millions of years. Since the first cosmonaut entered space, mankind's aerospace journey only began 6 decades ago. Now the ardor for space exploration is gaining momentum again around the globe. Like the Enterprise heading to where no one has gone before, space perhaps can be our final frontier.